Hey guys, a number of people were asking me questions about the homework problems, so I'm just going to take a moment now and go through the homework problems step by step. If you are totally comfortable answering these homework problems already, then don't worry about this video. You don't need to watch it. But if you're curious, you want to take up your answers from the homework, just follow along for a second here. I'll try and make this as quick as possible. Okay, so the first question in the textbook is giving you a scenario with cats. And we're looking at a gene for whisker length. And it says that there are two types of whisker length that you can see in cats, two different alleles. Okay, you can either have the dominant allele, which is going to be denoted with a big W, and that codes for long whiskers, or you could have the recessive allele, which is little w, and then that codes for short whiskers. Okay, so that's going to give us our let statement straight off. It's telling us what our let statement is going to be. So when we solve this problem, step one is always going to be to define your let statements. So our let statements here are going to be let big W be what was it here? Long whiskers. And that's codes for dominant because it's capital W, codes for dominant. By the way, W's are not great letters to use for this, so textbook right out of the gate not doing a great job. W's not a great letter to use, but I'll try and make the capital and small letters as clear as possible. So little w, I'll draw it like that. So we're going to let little w be short whiskered. Okay, and that's the recessive. Okay, so capital W is dominant over small w. Long is dominant over short. So that's the first part of any genetics problem solving question, is you're going to include your let statements. The second part, if you're just looking at mating between two individuals, is you're going to say what you know about those individuals. So first of all, what is the genotype or phenotype, whatever you're given about those individuals. So we know, okay, let's have a look here. One parent is, so we're going to do A first, by the way, here. So this is part A. Maybe I should make that more clear. So this is all part A. So if one parent is heterozygous long whiskered, so heterozygous means they have one of the dominant and one of the recessive. So we know that we're going to be crossing a dominant, a heterozygote, dominant, and recessive. And then it's going to be crossed with pencil's doing something weird here. There we go. Can I not move my screen around? What happened? Oh, there we go. Okay, there we go. And then the second part here is long whiskered, and the other parent is short whiskered. Okay, so short whiskered is got to be two recessive. So we know it's going to be little w, little w. Those are the genotypes of the parents. We also need to show the phenotypes of the parents. So the phenotypes of the parents, big W, little w, that's going to be long whiskered. That's supposed to be an O. And then we're going to be crossing with short whiskered. Okay, so then what it's asking is, what would you expect, what percentage of offspring would you expect to have short whiskers? Short whiskers we're looking for, which would be homozygous recessive. So part 4 here is we're going to do our Punnett square. So our Punnett square is going to have big W, little w on the side, and it's going to have little w on top. And what's on top and what's on the side doesn't really matter in this case. So just one parent goes on the top and one parent goes on the side. So when we do this, we're going to end up with big W, little w, big W, little w, little w, little w, and little w, little w. So that is our Punnett square. The next part now is to do an analysis of the Punnett square. So we're going to show our genotypic ratios Sorry, I'm still working on the writing with this pencil. And so our genotypic ratios in this case is we have WW, big W, little w, and we have little w. So those are the two genotypes that we have present. And it is 2 of one to 2 of the other. And that's the same thing as saying the ratio is 1 to 1. So the ratio of big W, little w to little w is 1 to 1. Or another way of saying that is that it's 50% each. So now we can show our phenotypic ratios. Oops. So the phenotypic ratios are going to mean what does this look like physically in the offspring. Phenotypic ratios. And so big W, little w is going to be long whiskered. And little w is going to be short whiskered. And so we're going to end up here with a 1 to 1 long to short. So the last part here is because this is a problem solving question, there is a 7th part, which is a therefore statement, which you're going to actually answer the question. So the question is asking you what percentage of offspring would have short whiskers. So we look at the phenotypic ratios here, and short whiskers here is 1 out of every 2. So that's the same thing as saying 50%. So 50% of offspring will have short whiskers. I should make it therefore here. Therefore, 50% of offspring. Okay, so that's our therefore statement. 50% of offspring have short whiskers. Okay, so that's part A, and I did not leave myself enough room here for part B. So I'm going to move this down onto the next page. So I have room to do part B. Okay, so part B now is asking us what? It says a male long-whiskered seal. Oh, so I thought we were looking at cats for some reason. Seals. Sorry, these are seal whiskers. Whatever, doesn't really make any difference. A long-whiskered seal is mated with a number of different females. Long-whiskered. Okay, so we know this isn't a standard genetics problem-solving question where it's giving you the parents and asking for the offspring. So this is a work backwards question where you're going to be given some information about the end product, and then you got to work your way back to what the potential parents would be. So I am going to use this sort of a similar strategy here, but I'm going to work backwards instead of working forwards. So, okay, male long-whiskered seal. So what do we know then about the parent? Well, we know that the parent, the one parent, and we don't have to do our let statements, by the way, because you would do let statements always, but in this case, we just did the let statements for this, so I'm going to use the same things here. We know the one parent is long-whiskered. So that means that I know for sure that the one parent is going to have a big W and then something. Okay, so they could be heterozygote or they could be homozygous. It could be big W, or it could be big W, little w. So we know that it's going to be either this or it's going to be this because the male is long-whiskered. Okay, so we need to figure out which one. And then we've mated it with some females. One second. Some females, all their offspring are long-whiskered. And some of the females are both long and short. Okay, so we know that this is going to be a cross with, there's going to be a whole bunch of different ones, but some of the females are going to be long-whiskered. So some of them are going to be this, some of them are going to be this, and some of them are going to be this. Okay, so some of them are short-whiskered. That's what it's saying in the question. So this one male over here is mating with any potential female, one of all of these. And then what do we know about the offspring? It says, some females are there. So it says, with some females, all their offspring are long-whiskered. Okay, so in a Punnett square, what it's saying is that for some of the females, every single one of the offspring is long whiskered, so contains a big W. Okay, so what that implies is that, well, what do we know about the parents? There has to be at least one big W in the parents, so that doesn't really actually tell us very much, because it actually could be coming from the male or the female. It doesn't say which one, so that's not very helpful. With some females, all their offspring are long whiskered. With some females, there are both long and short whiskered. Okay, so it's also saying that some of the females, when they mate, it's producing long and short. So short has to be little w, little w. So there has to be a little w coming from both parents in this case. Okay, so like let's say that this is the male over here, and then this is the female up here. Okay, so we know that the female's got to be contributing a little w, and the male's got to be contributing a little w, because at least some of the offspring are short whiskered. So that immediately answers the question. Okay, because we know that the male has to be contributing a little w in order to produce short whiskered offspring ever, because there has to be two short. So what that means, because the male, we know that the male is has a big W, going back to here, we know that because it's long whiskered, then we know now that this has to be the genotype for the male, because it produced at some point a short whiskered offspring. So the only possibility, the only way that it could produce a short whiskered offspring would be that if it was a heterozygote. So I think the question is asking then, what's the genotype of the male? Yeah, so the genotype of the male has got to be then this one right here. It's got to be the heterozygote. It's the only way to make a little w, or a little w in the offspring. So I would say that we know that the genotype is big W, little w, and the way we know is that it produced a short whiskered offspring, and that's the only way to make a short whiskered offspring. All right, so that would be my answer then for part B, for part B1. The second part here, it says, would it be possible to find a female mate? Would it be possible to find a female mate that would produce only short whiskered offspring? Okay. So let's have a look at the possibilities here. We know the male. We know the male is going to be big W, little w. It's saying this is what we have to work with. We have this to work with. Is there any combination of things that you could put in the female up here that could potentially produce only short-haired, only short-whiskered rather? Okay, let's have a look. So obviously the most likely chance to produce short-whiskered would be to have only short-whiskered alleles, right? Little w, little w. That'd be the most short-whiskered we could possibly make the female in this case. And I'll mention here, this is the female up here, and then this is the male down here. We know this is the male's genotype. Okay, so if we were only contributing short-whiskered from the female side, we would still make big W, little w, big W, little w, little w, little w, little w, little w. So this is the best case scenario where the female is only contributing short whiskered. And you'll notice that in this case, it still produces 50% of the time a long whiskered baby. So no, there is no genotype that the mother can contribute here that would potentially make only short whiskered. It's always going to be a 50-50 chance if that is what the male is contributing. So I'm going to write that in here too. Oops. is no genotype for the female that it could only produce short whiskered offspring. Whispered. Oops. Alleles. Only short whiskered alleles. Would still produce long whiskered babies 50% of the time. Okay, last question. Mendel found that crossing wrinkled seeded plants with homozygous round seeded plants produced only round seeded plants. Okay, so now we're looking at plants, but it works exactly the same way for plants. I'm just going to quickly do a little set of let statements here just to keep track of what the particular letter combinations are for these alleles. So we have let, and the dominant here is round seed B capital R. Okay, so that's dominant. And let wrinkle seed B small r. Okay, so those are our let statements. Capital R is the dominant and it means round seeds. Little r is wrinkled seeds. Okay. What genotype ratio and phenotype ratio can be expected from a cross between a wrinkle-seeded plant and a heterozygous plant for this characteristic? Okay, so part 2 here is what are the parents? Okay, so the parents here are wrinkle-seeded. So wrinkle-seeded would be little r, and then the other parent is heterozygous. So heterozygous means big R, little r. Heterozygous is a combination between the two. Okay, so that's the genotypes of the parents. The phenotypes of the parents here are, so little r would be wrinkled. Oops, wrinkled. And then we're crossing here with round seed. Okay, so wrinkled crossed with round. We're going to do a little Punnett square. Okay, so our Punnett square is wrinkled on one side, heterozygous round. We get big R, little r, big R, little r, and little r. Okay, so then let's look at our phenotypic and genotypic ratios. So first of all, genotypic ratios. We have big R, and we have little r. And so the ratio of big R, to little r is 2 to 2 or 1 to 1. Or you could say 50% each. And our phenotypic ratios here are, so big R, little r is going to be come out round. And little r is going to come out wrinkled because it's homozygous recessive. Wrinkled wrong. Wrinkled. Okay, and then that's also going to be in a 1 to 1 ratio. Okay, so going back to our original question, it's asking you what genotypic ratio and phenotypic ratio can be expected from a cross between wrinkled and heterozygous. So we just did that. And so the genotypic rates here, so this is the last part here would be to answer the question. 7. So this cross would produce 1-to-1 big R to little r. Those would be the genotypic ratios. Which produces a phenotype of 1-to-1 round to wrinkled. Okay, so it's going to be 1-to-1 or 50% round and 50% wrinkled. Okay, so here we have taken the same setup here, the same sort of 6 or 7 steps, and then we've applied them to solving these genetic problem-solving questions to figure out what the ratios are going to be of a particular trait in offspring. Part B was a little bit harder for number 1 because you had to kind of work backwards. You're given the end product, what you see in the Punnett square, and then you have to kind of work back and try and figure out what the parents would have to be in that particular case to give you that result. So that one's not quite as straightforward, but anyway, you can still sort of use the steps. You just have to kind of work backward a bit. Okay, hopefully that was helpful for anybody that was having trouble with the homework problems. Again, don't be afraid to post questions if you've got them. If they're public, there is a place to post them in the feed. And then if they are just a question which you think was just good for you and me, then you post it as a private comment on the assignment. Okay, I will see you guys all tomorrow.